Hello, this is Jennifer Farrell with UXPA International, and I am here today to introduce our webinar on using the power of podcasts to explore, collect, and deliver information. This is Bernard, and I'll keep this short and turn it over to Casey.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining me, everybody. Happy summer. Happy Friday. Just to give you a little background on me, I am a qualitative marketing research consultant in Austin, Texas, and I got connected with your organization through when I presented at the QRCA conference. So my background's more qualitative than UX, but I know there's some overlap, and I think that you can still use some of the same concepts I'm talking about are real broad, and you can pull from them for your own work as well. So like I said, I'm a consultant. I've been on my own for a few years, and the last, I think, 2.5 years, I started kind of moonlighting with a friend of mine. She is a YouTube professional. That's her job. She makes YouTube videos about knitting, and I'm a knitter. So she and I were friends, and she needed some help. So I started helping her with social media. So that was like my moonlighting job. And then she said, hey, what if we did a podcast? Because she gets a lot of questions from people who write into her, and she thought that would be a great way to answer all those questions instead of emails. So we're like, sure, we can figure it out. So we figured out a podcast. And so I was really enjoying that, and I still enjoyed that, and thought, what can I do with this? Because, you can't make a lot of money with a knitting podcast, believe it or not. But what can I do to combine this or grow this into a different place? And so I, considered just being a podcast consultant and giving it my research career, but I didn't really want to do that. And then I realized as I started thinking about it, and a friend actually said to me, why don't you look at podcasts for research? And so I started thinking about that, and the wheels started spinning, and I quickly realized that we can actually use podcasts in a lot of places for our research. So we can use it for exploration, data collection, and delivery. So I'm going to talk about all these different places, how we can use them, but I just want to take a step back. I hope because you're listening that you are a podcast listener and it's something that you use, but just in case, I do know that there's people out there who still don't really get it. They don't know how to download them. They don't know why they should be listening to podcasts. So just in case that's you, don't be ashamed. Podcasts are basically broadcasts that used to be on the radio or somebody else. In the years that the Apple iPod came out, the word broadcast and iPod got mixed together into podcasts. And so now you're not relying on somebody to broadcast the show when you want to listen. You can download them at any time. And so these logos on the left are podcast apps that you can download to your phone. And the purple one is the Apple native app, although I do recommend Overcast, which is the one next to it, because it's just a little more user-friendly. But you can subscribe to a show. Some shows have now become more serialized, where it's a story told over multiple episodes, but a lot of shows are just one-off episodes. And so you can download them and listen directly in your phone, or you can listen online. And there's all different sorts of podcast genres and styles. So with Fresh Air, you've got arts and entertainment, and that's a one-on-one interview. With Hardcore History, you have just a single person's, a single narrative, and that's a history podcast. With Pod Save America, it's usually a panel discussion. And Radio Lab is science. Welcome to Night Vale is an example of fictionalized storytelling. So there's all different kinds of genres and topics that you can find in podcasts. So now we're about to a point where 50% of all US homes are podcast fans, and they're more popular than blogs. And so I'm telling you this, not so much that you should be creating your own podcast, although that might be something you're thinking about, but these are becoming more popular ways for people to get and share information. And so now I found this stat a couple of months ago. About 30 companies in the S&P 500 are using podcasts for their internal communication updates. So instead of an internal blog or memo or whatever other way they used to share information, they're also giving them podcasts to listen to. So your employees can listen when they're commuting or when they're doing their laundry or whatever, and just get their updates that way. So in terms of a research approach, I really like this this quote from Chad Abumrad, excuse me. He is the host of Radiolab. And he says, in a sense, I'm painting something, but I'm not holding the paintbrush, you are. So it's this deep act of co-authorship, and in that is some potential for empathy. So that to me is really helpful, I think, when we think about ourselves as consultants or researchers, that we are working together with our clients to kind of build a story, but we're also trying to create empathy for the people that we're researching with. Like, we want to create empathy for our participants in our research. So just keep those thoughts in mind about podcasts in general. And then I started thinking about this, like, why do I like podcasts? And I find myself like quoting it all the time. I actually have a sticker on my computer now that says, I heard that on a podcast, because I say that all the time. But audio is a lot more intimate. Obviously, it's like in your ears, literally, but also it forces your brain to make more connections. So this quote, you're building your own images from the story in your mind, and you're creating your own production. And that's something you can't get with visual media. So when you watch a TV show, they're telling you what the person looks like. But when you're listening, you have to kind of imagine what that person looks like. And so that creates more connections in your brain, and then that makes it more memorable. So with all that background on podcasts, let's look at different ways that we can use podcasts for our work. So exploration, our first step in research. So there's a joke that I won't tell, it's a little off color, but podcasts, I say, are like opinions. Everyone has one. They're not all good. But you and I could make a podcast. Like right now, we could be recording this conversation, and we could put it up on iTunes, and now we have a podcast. So it doesn't really have to be, it's got such a low barrier to entry that it's really easy to make a podcast. So for that, I think that's actually good for us, because it's an opportunity for us to use it in exploration. This came to me when I heard about this podcast. It's actually a guy, I live in Austin, Texas, and I'm on this Austin podcasters group, and this guy was sharing about his show, Friends with Deficits. And so what it is, he interviews people with rare diseases. He started with his friends, but he's kind of expanded to more people. And it's a really interesting concept, because he's just, having a conversation with a friend to find out what their experience is like, which is what we do in research. And so one of his first episodes was about a friend who has some kind of rare form of blindness. And I listened to it and I was like, gosh, if I was doing research on this condition, this is a landmine. This is a one-on-one interview. The guy's talking about his experience. It's giving me all this sort of language that he uses, and maybe answering questions I have, and maybe creating the beginning of my discussion guide for my next research project. So I thought, what if we look around at all the different kinds of podcasts? What could we find? So these are just a few examples. I just started searching random topics, and, telecom resellers have their own podcast. The Toolbox Show, that's a show for contractors like plumbers or any kind of person that do work that comes into your home. So I'm sure they have a whole series of insurance and health safety issues that other types of professionals don't have. And so that's their show on a podcast. Secure Transportation and Executive Protection News. Like, I'm not even really sure what that is, but they have a podcast. So if that's something you're researching, I recommend you go out and you dig around and you try to find research, or you try to find podcasts about that topic, because that can give you that language. It can give you just a starting point to understand what the issues are. That one up in the corner, like the eyeglasses, that's an optician podcast, but there's only one episode. So you may have trouble finding stuff that fits with your topic, but you never know. You might, find a whole bunch of great information. And so as I was going through this, there's another level that we can use for exploration phase of our research, and that's recruiting. This guy has a podcast called Strokecast, excuse me. And it's he's a Gen X stroke survivor. And so he actually has a really nice website. Sorry if you heard that noise, my cat just jumped on my desk. So anyway, he has Strokecast, and each episode, he has a really nice, thorough website where he talks about, he has the actual episode, he has notes, and he has the bio of the person he talked to. So if you were looking for a doctor, for example, who works with stroke survivors, this guy has interviews with these people, and he has this guy's bio, he has his whole background. So why not go through this website and find these people? They put their stories out there, they put their contact information out there. They would probably be good for you to recruit through. I was working on a project where we were recruiting people who worked in interior design. And so we did our own recruiting, and we went through a magazine, but this would have been easy if we'd gone through some podcasts as well. So in addition to that, he has all these stroke support groups listed on his site. Another opportunity for you to connect with these people. So there's, Facebook groups and things like that. So thinking about podcasts as just a source for your recruiting is another opportunity for us. So then started thinking about how we can use podcasts as we do data collection. And like I said, I'm more of a qualitative researcher. So podcasts are basically qualitative research. So we have one-on-one interviews. We have people going out and doing research and delivering a story based on what they found. And so I think we can use these. This is really more for the pure qualitative approach. But when you're designing studies, looking at podcasts for the different ways they collect the information or deliver the information is really inspiring. So I did a whole section on this at the QRCA, and I know that's not really the focus of UX, but just to share, to maybe inspire you for some of your design approaches. So Radio Diaries is a show that they just give the recorder to the subjects, and they don't have a narrator. And so they piece the story together without narration, and the story speaks for itself, which I think is really impactful. It's won a lot of awards. They're very personal stories, but we could do the same things in our research. Take the narrator out. This REI Take It From Me is a really interesting approach because they have two professionals in different outdoor topics, like somebody might be a cyclist and somebody might be a rock climber. And so person A interviews person B. Well, then for the next episode, person B, who might be the rock climber, is going to interview another person who might be a cyclist. And so they're going to take the information from their interview as an interviewee and then take it to the next one. And so I think it'd be interesting to do this with people, because then you see what kind of topics carry on, like a game of telephone, sort of. You can see what goes between those interviews. StoryCorps is a show where two people, usually sometimes it's three, who have a shared experience, interview each other. And so you take the moderator out, and so they're going to share with you what's the most important piece of the story. I know a lot of moderators do this kind of work too. This American Life is just like the ultimate first. If you're just getting into podcasts, I highly recommend this show. It gives you kind of a whole new way of looking at stories, because they take a story on a theme and then they come at it with a different direction than what you would expect. And then BBC Radio is just a show where they play a song and they interview the person who wrote the song, but they also have people who are reacting to the song, how it played in their life. And it's a really interesting way of presenting research on, like advertising. If you had a radio commercial and you could play that radio commercial, and then you have the people talking about their reactions to it overlaid with that commercial, it's just a lot more impactful than reading a PowerPoint report. I'm going to play just a little clip. This is a very qualitative approach. This is a show called Everything is Alive. It's one of my favorite shows because it's light, it's funny, but it's also kind of profound. So what they do is they interview an inanimate object. And so a person takes on the persona of that object, and it just ends up being really profound and funny. And I'm just going to play a short clip from A Grain of Sand.
I'd like to ask you about the beach. Because first of all, what was it like having humans sit on you?
I mean, as near as I can tell, most of the humans who come to the beach, that is like the journey that you all seem to like of going to the beach, is always to some degree a frustrated journey.
Yeah.
You either forgot something, or you forgot that it was going to be hot that day, or you don't like that someone else is playing music, or you've lost track of someone and you can't find them. Like I've never really seen a human have a fully pleasurable experience at the beach. There's always a something of some sort that goes wrong. And then you all often express a great deal of surprise that there's sand everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's just an idea to show you how we can present when we do some different kind of approaches. Like a lot of times we'll ask people to write a Dear John letter, or we'll ask them to kind of take on the personality of that product that we're researching. And so you get some good information. I know it sounds silly, but you get some good information. So this just is another way of illustrating that we can do that, and we can get inspiration for some of these ideas through podcasts. So just to talk about why podcasts, why collecting audio only is important. It's engaging because you are forced to, like, when you're just listening, it's a lot more engaging. You hear the sighs, you hear a lot more emotion in people's voices. You're not distracted. You have to listen to the story. It's a lot more emotional. There's a privacy, and this is kind of important to me. I feel like, especially if you're doing healthcare research, we're asking a lot of our respondents to show their homes and to, record their faces and do a lot of stuff, which sometimes we don't really need that. And let's give them a little bit more space. Like, I know as a participant, I wouldn't really want to give you a selfie video because I'm just not comfortable with that. So, let's give them just an opportunity to record audio only, and we can still get the same good information. And then you kind of remove the visual bias. So I've been in focus groups where we're in the back room, the people walk in, we're behind the glass, and I've heard clients say some not nice things about people. And so they've already prejudged them just on their looks, and they're probably not going to really listen to that person anymore. And so if we just take away the visual bias, then we can force them to hear their story. And then data collection, it's so easy to collect an audio recording. If you're doing web interviews, you've got it right there in the Zoom platform. It's super easy to record. If you are just doing one-on-one interviews, you can record. And actually now I've done some recording with my phone and it sounds just fine. It's just a lot easier than data collection, asking people to send in a video, asking a whole lot of different ways of getting data. And I just put this in here because I found it when I was working on the presentation, and I just feel like it's perfect. Like, do we really need all this angle? Can we take a step back and just get the story? And so here's an example from a project I did. It was on healthcare, home caregivers, and this woman's talking about her mother.
She's an old lady.
Yeah.
There's a thing they say, once a man, twice a child. I don't know if you know what that means. It means that,
Go back to being a child.
you were born a child, but when you get older, you go back to being a child again.
So we don't need to see her to know that she's ugly crying, and we don't need to, be all up in her face. Like, let's give her a little privacy while she's crying. She doesn't want to be on camera, but we still get that emotion. And I think that we get more emotion when we hear the audio versus seeing a video. So now, obviously, delivery is where I think that podcasts we can use the most. I've been doing this for like the last almost year now, and it's been pretty fun. So there's a lot of different ways we can use podcasts. We can do an executive summary, and that seems to be kind of the easiest. It's kind of an add-on to your full report. It gives people just a 10-minute summary of what we talked about and what we learned, but we are adding in the actual quotes of people, like they get to hear their actual voices, and it seems to be more impactful and just gives them a little extra that they don't get when they read a one-pager. You could do a full report. You can get creative. I did a big project where we re-upped some personas. And so for each persona, we created their podcast story. And it really helped because you could hear the voices of the kids that we talked to. It was for our students. And it was very, like, the clients were kind of not sure about it. And then when they heard it, they loved it. They just were like, this is so cool to actually like get into the mindset of the kids, and we get to hear their voices and we get to hear their story. And then just a weekly update is another way you could use it. Like if you're doing an ongoing study over many weeks or months, instead of sending your client to check in or sending them a written update, give them kind of like a 5-minute audio download where you can hear what you've been hearing out in the field, or you can just give them an audio update. And so especially for clients who are commuting on trains or in cars, it's really easy for them to download something and listen to it. So why might you do this other than what I just told you? But if your client is a podcast fan, this goes over really well because you know that they're already listening to it. They're already used to the format. Give them something that they can listen to. If your client and team commutes, like I said, this gives them a chance they can just listen and not have to get their laptop out, and they can hear a report. A lot of times you might hear your client say, or your executive say, just give me the 5-minute version. You know, you're riding on an elevator, you literally have to give them an elevator speech. You can give them something that they can listen to, the 5-minute version of what you heard. Sometimes your research is shared across teams and they don't really need the full report. Like your insights team probably needs your full report, but maybe the sales team only needs the top line. Well, are they going to open that email with another PowerPoint? Are they going to open that full report and read the executive summary? There's actually been some research that shows they're not. So you can give them this audio and give them a chance to hear what you're saying. Sometimes if there's a real complicated analysis, this is more like if you're doing a quantitative study, you can get your analytics team, especially if you have somebody really good who can describe the data in a way that makes more sense and makes it more attainable. Again, nobody's reading the report. If that's happening, give them a new way of reading. Give them a preview before a big meeting. We did that piece that I just played with the woman talking about her mom. That was a podcast created before a big meeting where they were going to have like a workshop about the research. And so we created these podcast reports that they could listen to before they got there. And so they had a little bit of, an idea of where they were going. Especially if it's a study that has a lot of emotion into it or as a nice different leave behind. So I know you're probably thinking, there's no way we have data, we can't do this. I'm just going to let you listen to this and we'll talk about what we hear.
All right, a study published today in the scientific journal PLOS offers insight into the complex relationship between drinking alcohol and the risk of cancer and premature death. The study finds that light drinkers have the lowest risk. NPR's Allison Aubrey reports.
Researchers studied about 100,000 people who lived in a bunch of U.S. cities, including Birmingham, Boulder, L.A., and Pittsburgh. They were in their mid-50s to early 70s when the study began, and all completed surveys about their alcohol consumption. Researchers tracked their health for about 9 years and found that the more a person drank, the higher their risk of cancer and cancer-related death. Andrew Kunzman of Queen's University Belfast in Ireland is the study author.
We definitely think it gives a bigger picture about what's going on here.
So how much is too much? This study suggests that light drinkers have the lowest combined risk of cancer and premature death, even lower than people who never drink, though it's not clear why. In this study, light drinking was defined as 1 to 5 drinks per week.
It seems to reassure light drinkers.
The study suggests that cancer risk starts to increase when people drink more than a drink a day, but the increase is modest. Moderate drinkers in the study had about a 10% increased risk of getting cancer. It's heavy drinkers who are most at risk. For instance, men who drank 3 drinks or more per day were 3 to 4 times more likely to develop cancer of the esophagus and liver cancer. The study comes at a time when some of the top cancer doctors in the U.S. are trying to get the word out about the risks of drinking too much. Here's oncologist Noelle Loconte of the University of Wisconsin. She's the lead author of a recent statement from the American Society of Clinical Oncology.
We're not proponents of complete abstinence. There probably is an amount of drinking that's okay. But from a cancer prevention standpoint, if you want to prevent cancer via diet, then drinking the least amount of alcohol possible would be the best strategy. And this study reinforced that.
As have other studies. But Loconte says the message has yet to get out. Most people are aware of the link between, say, skin cancer and sun exposure and lung cancer with tobacco use. But when it comes to drinking alcohol,
we do not think that most Americans are currently aware of the link between alcohol and cancer.
In fact, a survey done by the American Society of Clinical Oncology last year found that about 7 in 10 adults did not recognize drinking alcohol as a risk factor for cancer. Loconte says the group is pushing for more education to spread the word and help put the risks in context. She says around the globe, about 5% of all cancers are linked to alcohol. The big ones are head and neck cancers, as well as liver, colorectal, and in women, breast cancer. Loconte says one way to help people cut back is to help them be more realistic about how much they're actually consuming.
I think in helping people understand what light drinking is, I think the first thing we need to talk about is what is a drink, right? So that's a single shot, 5 ounces of wine or 12 ounces of beer.
It's really easy to drink more than this without realizing it. Current guidelines recommend no more than 1 drink a day for women, 2 for men, but Loconte says even this might be too much.
I think this study, as I reviewed it, looked like a safer amount would be 1 drink a day for everybody, regardless of gender.
At least that's what this study suggests. More research is underway. Allison Aubrey, NPR News.
So I just give that as an example because I've heard some quant people be like, well, we have data, we can't record stuff. We are getting data in that format. We have gotten data reports for centuries probably, but hearing data and numbers is something that we get all the time. If you listen to the radio this afternoon, start paying attention to, other than the political drama, there's a lot of research that's reported in audio form. And so that was just 4 minutes, and we got all of this. We've got the introduction, and we got the methodology. We got details in the methodology, which cities they covered, how many people they talked to. We got their key findings, more numbers. Heavy drinkers are 3 to 4 times more likely to develop cancer. And 7 out of 10 do not know of the link between drinking and cancer. And we got the implications at the end. And I really like that they interview the researchers so they can put it into the terms of what is the most important part of the research. And so this is an example that I put together. It's a fake focus group, but it gives you a sense of what it can sound like for a research report.
Thank you, Dave.
Video games, smartphones, TV, also known as screen time. Ask any American parent about screen time, and you'll likely hear a sigh, followed by a discussion filled with frustration. We talked to moms with children in elementary and middle school to learn about their experience with screen time. What is their experience? How do they manage it with their children, and what help are they looking for? Do they expect companies to make changes to help them manage their children's screen time? We sat down with a group of moms in Austin, Texas, and had this discussion. The struggle is real.
Oh, absolutely. It is the bane of my existence. It's my fight every day that we're at home. Because the kids are completely addicted to it and they have very little willpower to discipline themselves, even though we have a set of rules and they know the rules and we've all agreed on the rules. It's very, very difficult for them to, it feels much better. I'm serious. It's so horrible. And I get it because I'm, on my phone all day long too. So I totally get it. But so I just feel like it's the constant thing that we're fighting every time that we're at home. Yeah.
Most parental controls are in the hands of parents who literally monitor when the device should be turned off or put away. Using parental control apps can be cumbersome or simply create another battlefront.
I did try the Our Pact app and it did not work, and it's probably user error, but it did not work for us because my older one legitimately needs to be able to use his iPad for homework. Yeah, and so it just shuts it down completely, and so that wasn't working. And so
we do that with Beck, my youngest, during the week. I shouldn't say he gets no screen time, but he has to earn it. With him, if it's a default that he can use it every day, it's just an argument for him to get to it. And so instead it's like the default is no, but if you are really good and on top of things, then you earn a little bit and that works well.
We don't use any apps. We've looked into it. We've just never done it. We have very little control over them. I mean, they scream at us so much. They'll hit us if we try to take the iPads away. And so we set parameters every time they get them that, you know, you're going to get 30 minutes or you get 30 minutes and then we do homework and we have the same thing. And almost every single time it's time to move on to homework, it's screaming. And then we decide if we want to battle it at that moment or if we want to cook for another 15 minutes and then battle it. And then usually dinner time is a good time. We shut it down.
Screen time is a source of frustration in many families, and today's parents recognize it as one of their challenges to bear. While they wish it was easier, like when they were a kid, they don't expect much help from the tech world.
So I can't blame the kids for being addicted because that's what it's designed to do. But, you know, I see my role as the person to help them learn discipline around their habit.
Well, it's like sugar, right? I mean, you don't leave a giant pile of candy around and tell your kids they can eat it anytime they want as much as they want, right? And they want it, right? It's the same thing. You just have to set and keep rules, but it's exhausting.
Tech companies in the category would win points with parents by developing easier to use controls or by simply acknowledging the challenge and communicating the best ways to manage screen time. Further research should be conducted with child development experts and consumers to explore these ideas. So that's just gives you an idea of what it can sound like. We've done a lot of different things where we've got the interviews with people directly, so it's more one-on-one, and it just has been a nice surprise, I think, for a lot of our clients. But, you know, I get it. You've got charts, you've got labels, and you've got other things that you have to show that are visuals. So again, I started looking at this in terms of a podcast, and I had kind of an aha moment thinking about Serial. If you have not listened to Serial, and you don't know about Serial, it kind of was a phenomenon about, I think it was 2015. I can't remember what year it came out, but what it was before Serial, a lot of podcasts were just one-off episodes, but Serial took the approach of the old serials, you know, like radio shows where you told a story over time. And so I was immediately into it because it came from the producers of This American Life. And so I knew that it would be good, but I didn't, it really, people were talking about it. There were podcasts about it. There was a SNL skit about it. So it really got into the zeitgeist. And now they've done other episodes or other series since. And now a lot of podcasts are, you know, series 4 to 8 episodes that tell a story over many episodes. So anyway, the thing about Serial was it's a murder investigation, and so they had evidence, and they had maps, and they had crazy fans asking for more, and so they created a website that has all the documents and maps and everything. And so you could listen to the episode, you could go back to the website and dig through all this. There's the cell phone call log, the cell tower map, which were pieces of evidence that were important in the story. And if you watch the HBO show, they break that down even more. They had call logs and timelines and things like that. So it made me recognize that we can have this audio format deliverable, but we can also update it or back it up with some visuals with the website. So the Persona project that I mentioned earlier, this is a fake version of it, but we have this podcast reports with the personas, but we created a website that was kind of the landing page where we put all the content. We put pictures and a little more text there, and built out each person's page. So you could listen to Carol's podcast, you could see her photo gallery, you could read her journal or whatever, or you could download parts of the report, and we pulled out like key quotes. And so it became more of an interactive report. It's still a report, but it's an interactive place, and the client really liked this. They really took it off. And so now it's kind of a living, breathing thing where it can grow, and you're not like searching for the PowerPoint deck anymore, but you can go to the website and get just what you need. They actually took those personas and they did a roadshow around the company where they had, QR codes. They had QR codes, so you could scan the QR code to download the podcast, and they put up banners with each persona profile. And so it was really exciting to see how they took that podcast concept and took it out even further. So if this is something that you want to do, reality check, I've got some tips for you. If you're doing qualitative reporting, consider it during design. Like I said, look at podcasts as inspiration for how you want to set up your interview style and set up your data collection. Have a good plan for recording. I just worked on a project with somebody about a month ago where they recorded in the focus group facility with a group, and because the audio wasn't great, we had a hard time kind of cleaning up that audio. So you want to plan ahead before you get there to make sure that you have good audio. It works great for one-on-one interviews. Zoom is a great platform. I've used other platforms specifically for podcasts, and I keep going back to Zoom. Online or mobile studies, these are great prompts when you're doing that, when you're doing like journaling and diary studies. If you're doing quantitative, create like a journalistic style report like I showed with the NPR story. Interview the researchers to explain your findings. And then if you did a survey and you want to read open-ended responses, I have had an intern who, the person who answered your question is a 20-year-old female. Go find the intern if she's a 20-year-old female and ask her to read the response. And so now you've got a little more illustration of that voice. And then for the website deliverable, you could use a password protected website, or you could use an intraweb if that's something your client has. And just make sure, again, like you have quality sound editing. And any audio producer will tell you it really is the front end that's going to make a huge difference. But then you could technically do this all on like GarageBand or something like that. But you'll get a lot more if you can find somebody. I'm sure in your town there are podcast producers who are looking for some money who could help you out, or I can help you if you want to connect with some. But yeah, definitely make a plan for it. And then I think what you'll find it's a nice little add-on to your research report, because right now we're not quite there where we're not able to get away from the PowerPoint. So I hope that gives you some inspiration and ideas. I have a baby podcast. It's just 2 episodes right now called Breaking Research. It's out there on iTunes if you want to hear it, or you can check it out on my website. And that's my Twitter handle, Nimble Podcasts. And I'm staying for questions if needed.
Casey, there is a question over in the chat, if you can see it. It's from Ellen.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Says that I can read it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Says, what suggestions do you have for someone who wants to start a qualitative interviewing business?
That's one I wasn't expecting. A lot of us came from agency side, and so the QRCA has been a great resource for me when I went out on my own, and the QRCA conference was fantastic. But just maybe interview other people who are already doing it and see what you can learn from them. And it's kind of hard to just answer not knowing where you're coming from. So if you want to email me, I'm happy to talk about that directly.
Well, everyone's unmuted. If anybody else has a question, or Ellen, if you want to do a follow-up, if you're still there. Anyone?
Bueller?
Bueller? Well, I guess we'll let it go at that. Casey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure.
It's been really great. We will have the recording up on our YouTube channel probably by later today or Monday, and we invite everybody to share it and go back and watch. And you have Casey's email if you have any questions. But thanks for joining us. I think that's it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, wait. We have one more question. Sorry. It says, I'm thinking of starting a qualitative research podcast for my org. What would be the simplest way to get engagement?
I'm sorry. I'm thinking about doing it in their organization?
Oh, yeah. Qualitative research podcast.
For my organization. There's a whole lot out there online about getting audience. So it's going to be a public-facing podcast, is what I'm guessing. Not for reporting. It's just you're just gonna have to do like your social media approaches, and you always, like in my knitting podcast, I just had an email. I interview people in the industry and outside who are doing different things, and every time we interview somebody new, they're going to put that out to their audiences, and so they're getting we get new listeners every time because they share it too. So I highly recommend interviewing people and then sharing that out getting them to share it as well. But it's just, social media, networking, getting the word out.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Okay, thank you.
Casey.